Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you're enjoying this show, I need you to do me a quick little favor. Just leave us that rating and review. We want to hear from you what you like about the show, but also how we can make it work harder for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Tamara Jones. Tamara Jones has been learning about short-term rental experiences worldwide since 2015. Back in February 2018, she started managing her first vacation property in Tybee Island, Georgia, while growing local partnerships. Now she has a company called Bucket List Stays, and bucketliststays.co is an owner-operator business that creates profitable investment opportunities for investors looking for passive income streams. Now, in addition to that, she also provides full service management to property owners, including property management, online services, vacation rentals, marketing, and much more. She has properties located in Santa Fe, Tybee Island, New Orleans, Fleming Island, and the Dominican Republic, just to name a few. Let's welcome to the show, Tamara Jones.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for creating spaces like that for people like me to come and share our stories and swap good information. Yeah.
Listen, I'm excited to have you on, and we were talking a little bit before we hit record, but you've got a very, interesting background, and you're investing in some markets that I think are really eclectic and interesting for people, particularly those people who like to travel. So let's get into your story, right? I spent maybe, 30 seconds going over your bio. Why don't you take 2 minutes to fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, you did a pretty good job, I have to say, John, but that's how I started in 2015 with a room. Back then, short-term rentals was not really a sexy thing. It was pretty new, it was pretty rudimentary, the way that you listed your units. And a matter of fact, I really was looking at couch surfing. It was a website called Couch Surfing at the time before I actually discovered Airbnb. And I decided, okay, I just departed the military. I was looking for a way to make extra money because I was a federal employee at the time. I was a legal assistant for the federal government. And I tell you, we don't make a lot. A lot of people think we just don't make a lot. And so I was looking for how can I supplement my income and make sure I was taking care of me and my children and things like that. So I decided to rent out a room. But what little did I know, John, that room started to pay all of my expenses. It was paying the mortgage. It was paying all of my expenses. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting more, just some extra money to have savings and things like that. Go maybe travel a little bit more, things like that. But the numbers that started coming out of that one room really started to blow me away. And I started to think, what does a whole unit do? If one room does this, if I get an entire unit, what does that do? And so I started to seek out mentorship, and I ended up with a company. It was called Your Space at the time. I ended up with a mentor and kind of like a job where I was touching everything in that company. I was doing the sourcing, doing a lot of the setups, working on some, a lot of the administrative stuff. It was kind of like a bartering thing because I had a good background to offer a skill set. So yeah, I stayed with that company for a couple of years, and I ended up getting my first unit while under that company as well, because I was learning, while working. I don't never discount hard work, John. You got to put in the work. So I was willing to get out there, and I actually was really, really working really long hours and things like that, touching everything that you could touch when it comes to short-term rental. And so now,
Tamara, I want to clarify a couple of things, right? So first of all, you mentioned that one room. You started with that and realized, wow, if I can get this for one room, what can I get for a whole unit? And to be clear, this was like, was this like a house you owned, or you were renting and you sublet it, or like, how did that work?
Yeah, I love how you asked that, because those are the same questions I had when I first started. But I owned this house and I rented out a room, but you don't have to own your house in order to do this. You just have to have legal access to the space that you're trying to list. I like to emphasize that legal access to the space that you're trying to list. And I actually discovered a method called arbitrage while I was with that company. And I swear by arbitrage to this day, because what arbitrage is it's basically taking control of a unit, any type of home. It could be a apartment, a condo, a single family home, taking control of that unit under contract as the master lease holder again, under contract as the master lease holder with the ability and a legal right to sublet it in order to profit. And that must be explicitly explained in the contract in order to profit off of. And you're able to list those on different sites. So it's many ways that you could step into short-term rentals. One of my favorite is arbitrage because it allows you to scale and it allows you to test a market that you may not be sure of without the commitment. When I say without the commitment, it means that in that contract, you're writing up, hey, if this property doesn't perform in the first 90 days, which is one of my favorite lines in our addendum, if it doesn't perform in the first 90 days, we're allowed to release this unit. Or if any kind of legalities show up, or the political climate changes, environmental climate changes, we are allowed to step out of that unit. And a lot of times the owners just like the security of having a partnership with a company that will take care of their place. That's the bottom line.
You're dropping so much information. I'm wrestling where I want to take this, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to confirm a couple of things. I love the fact that you talked about being able to test the market using this arbitrage strategy, which we've heard of before. And if you haven't, what Tamara's saying is basically you take on a master lease agreement with the property with the ability to sublet it out. And you made some very key distinctions, which I want to make sure I emphasize as well. You have to have the ability in your agreement to do this, to monetize it. Don't just, sign a lease and then behind the landlord's back, try to sublet it out and do this. That's not what she's describing at all. You're talking about playing with your cards on the table, being very clear that you have the right to do this so that you're not setting yourself for any legal issues. But you mentioned also that you have a clause, and I'm not sure if this is standard language, but I think it's very insightful and something that anyone looking to employ this strategy should think about. But you have a clause that gives you kind of a 90-day out. You can test the market. If it's not what you thought, you're not getting the demand you wanted, or there's some changes either from an environmental standpoint or from a governmental standpoint, you can then back out after 90 days. And keep in mind, too, the other big advantage of this is you're not coming up with 20% down payment to buy this property, fixing it up, doing all this huge investment just to learn that, maybe you missed something in your strategy. So it allows you to come in with maybe minimal amount of capital invested. And then depending on how that goes, you can kind of build out your strategy from there. So I just love that. The other thing that was really interesting to me is you mentioned like couchsurfing.com and, this website where you were kind of being mentored, but also working there. And it just made me think like, man, if couchsurfing.com had a better name, maybe they would have been Airbnb, right? Because I heard a story of the Airbnb founder. He was like, that's what I was doing. I was just couch surfing, right? And maybe that doesn't sound like the kind of thing people are excited to sign up for and convince your spouse to go on vacation. We're going to rent a couch surfer. It's like, nah, I think I'm good. But Airbnb had kind of a broader, bigger name. So just one of those things we talk about branding and naming, this is something you might want to keep in mind. You could have been huge if you would have put the right name on that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly why I kind of steered. Once I found Airbnb and Verbal after that, I kind of steered away from the whole couch surfing thing. I'm like, what are we, hippies? But the concept, it sparked the concept and the idea. But you're absolutely right. Once I discovered Airbnb, I'm like, this is probably more my speed. Yeah, I've told you, And so, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
So you got in this knowledge, right? You're learning the business, you're growing. You said you got your first unit while kind of working with your space there. What was that first property like? And I want to call out to like another great insight for you was just learning while you earn. And I think that's really important. The education, committing to the education, but also taking action. And that's what you did with this first unit or this first property. So tell us about that first property. Kind of what did you see? How did you go about, getting it together? Just give us more background there.
I love that question. And the reason why is because don't do it. I'm going to tell you the way I did it and not to do it that way. Because even though I was being mentored, I had a chip on my shoulder that I wanted to do it all myself. I kind of wanted to go figure things out myself. I didn't want to ask I didn't want the company to feel as though that I was there more to take than to give, because they were already giving me the knowledge, a lot of knowledge. So what I did was I decided, okay, I love the beach. And I thought it was, wouldn't that be so great to have my first full short-term rental on the beach, which I ended up getting. But the way I did it was I rented out a hotel room for about 4 days. And when I say 4 days, it's because I was getting ready to give up on the fourth day. And I literally was going street to street, corner to corner, ad to ad, because those small towns like beach towns, they when they have inventory, they don't necessarily put that out to the public. It's who you know in the internal management companies that are residing on that island or in that space. And so I was going around and I saw a for rent sign in this one little yard on Jones Avenue. And I'm like, this is an omen. It's Jones. It's my last name. It's got to happen, right? And it was on the last day before I was deciding to go ahead and go home and get a little bit more mentorship on how this is supposed to work. And I took down a number, I called the owner, and I set up an appointment to come see the place. And when I got there, I kind of spilled my guts like, hey, I want to use this place. I'm going to list it on Airbnb. I promise I'll fix it up, because everything I was looking at wasn't the best of inventory. And that's kind of what I did learn, is that you have a better chance when you're willing to come put some skin in the game. You're willing to fix something up. So he actually laughed at me, the owner, and said, hey, I tried that and I really sucked at that. And if you could do a better job and I could get my rent, go ahead. And we hammered out the saddest little contract because I did not use the mentorship that I was under at the time, because I wanted to come back and say, I did it. And, they really, the owner of the company at the time said, we really got to redo this contract. And so I really started getting into better ways to do the contract. And that's how I came up with the 90 days out. That's always improving that contract. But that's what happened. Now, I do want to share a lesson about, because somebody's going to want to do the same thing I did. Even if they buy, they're going to want to go to a beach town or a touristy area. You have to be careful with those areas, because what I learned in a very difficult manner was that those are very seasonally impacted. So when I got the unit, it was the top of the summer, and that's when you have that fever to acquire and all of that. But that's actually not the best time to acquire those type of units. It's really on the down season. But when I did that, what happened was all the reservations came to a screeching halt at the end of August, and I was not prepared to carry that unit. And I really got my true introduction on this is what short-term rental means, and this is how it's different than a traditional asset. It is very seasonally impacted, and more so if you're in those areas like beach type of towns and things like that. So what I did was immediately I went and looked for a unit that will balance the season of Tybee Island. So I went and got my New Orleans unit probably about 3 to 4 months afterwards, because I really was ready to scale. And they both balanced each other out nicely. When New Orleans really has a winter peak season that people don't know during Mardi Gras and things like that, it really was able to carry Tybee while Tybee was down in those months. And it gave me the lesson that you can't just be rolling in the dough, in the high season. You got to squirrel away a little bit for when you have to carry that unit away. But balancing a portfolio, making sure you understand that seasonality is a factor when you're dealing with short-term rentals. That was my
Tamara, lots of great insights there. One, I love the fact that, and I didn't quite get into you talked a little more, but like you went and got a hotel in Tybee Island and looked for a property while you were there, right? At first, I thought you were going to say that you were trying to Airbnb arbitrage the hotel room. Like, that seems crazy. But to see that, and I think the insight there is when we talk about taking action, that's what, go to the market.
Yes.
Commit. You committed 4 days to drive around, put ads out, talk to people, network your butt off, and you finally came across a property.
Yeah, I came
up with that's
one.
The insight. You've got to put in the work. You got to hit the ground. You've got to knock on some doors. You've got to just take that action. And then eventually something's going to happen. You learn from that. There's a little bit of ego there. You want to come back and say, that's I got this property. Let's not let our ego have us make mistakes. I mean, pride is great. I love taking action. But if you have resources around you that can help you mitigate risk and avoid mistakes, use those resources, right? And then the other piece you talked about was balancing the portfolio, recognizing that this was really more of a seasonal property, particularly being at a beach property, finding something where that season was different from the beach property. In that way, now throughout the entire year, you have pretty good cash flow. So you're not really looking at one and trying to tighten your pants because, you're going to be really lean for a few months. Now you've got it balanced and you built a portfolio. And I think you should think about that portfolio holistically, whether it's
Yes.
only real estate, whether you have other investments you do, but where are you exposed? Where do you have potential risk and how do you balance that? And that's exactly what you were able to do. When you selected New Orleans, I mean,
Yeah.
was that specifically because you knew that they thrived in the winter because of Mardi Gras, or did you just kind of get lucky and fall into that?
No, I was looking at who thrives in the winter. Like what area do I go to that would be the peak season in the winter if I had peak season in the spring and the summer, or what unit could I go to that had peak season really all year round? There are markets like that. Atlanta is actually one of them, honestly. Atlanta is one of those markets. Dallas is one of those markets, and tell you that's changed over time because of some of the normalcy that's happened with short-term rentals. But at the time, there were some markets that it didn't matter what season you were in, they're going to perform all year round. But specifically, I started looking for as a lesson, hey, who performs during those the winter season? And I did my research as well, and in New Orleans was showing even though it has a fickle type of environment, meaning that it goes through, a lot of hurricane warnings and things like
Yeah.
that. It actually it bounces back really well, and till this day, that market has not changed. That market still remains one of our strongest. Is our in our top three markets. So we have two places there now, in which you can build out however you want. But my another thing I wanted to say is that I meet a lot of people now ask me about building all in one space. I've had that a lot of people asking me, hey, I got a 14, I want to build 14 units or 12 units here. That's really risky. That's really risky because, like I said, short-term rentals are highly impacted by the political environment, the weather environment, the any policies, anything can impact, unlike other type of real estate assets. So if you're going into that market and it's for, just for your own benefit, meaning that you're going into it just as a multifamily investor and that's your first priority, got it, understand, because you're going to fall back on it. But if you're going into it because you're really interested in the returns that short-term rentals have to offer, I would say spread your portfolio out. The more you centralize that portfolio, the more risk there is there.
So,
Yeah.
Tamara, let's talk about that because I think the hard part for people, I think logically it makes sense, right? Diversify, have some stuff in, warmer climates, have some stuff in different types of markets. Makes sense in theory. The
Mhm.
execution becomes really difficult for people, particularly since these are smaller assets, right? We're talking typically either one unit or a smaller number of units. So, how did you scale and manage a property? And I'm not exactly sure what Tybee Island is, so I'll just
Yeah, it's
make
in
myself
Georgia.
vulnerable. Okay, so
It's right outside of Savannah, Georgia. So it's
okay.
about 5 hours from here.
So you've got one in outside of Savannah, you've got one in New Orleans. How are you managing those properties?
Yeah. I love it because that's kind of what I teach too. And I'm not plugging myself, but what I teach is how do you make this passive, right? You don't want to lose your life to short-term rentals because you have stepped into the hospitality business once you kind of take on short-term rentals. And it's all about the process. It's all about the way that you set it up, all about the contracts. And I tell you, I'm big on contracts. So that course that I'm alluding to, my master course on pinkpassiveincome.com, it includes those contracts that saves you from how do I manage this remotely and how do I make it passive? And it's all about the way that you checklist your processes. And we've taken a lot of time, even I got a lot of that from your space when I was with that company. And my company now, our crew, we are constantly improving upon really leveraging technology. So, whenever you start entering the human factor, that's where you'll say, okay, this gets difficult. But if you leverage technology in conjunction with processes, you're going to be able to manage your unit no matter where. And I'll tell you, our biggest test for that, John, was we took it over to the Dominican Republic. We took it overseas. And that's another thing that I would say. There's other things that came up when we went over to Dominican Republic, but the core of our processes allowed us to take and test waters overseas. And you might not necessarily want to jump in there with a full out investment, of ownership immediately. I would say test those waters, decide if that's where you want to make your permanent footprint at, then go in. And we've been able to even offer information to people that are saying, hey, I want to go into that market. What are you finding? Well, I can tell them what we're finding because we've been in that market now for about a year, a little over a year. Yeah.
So give us one common mistake when it comes to the systems and processes and the things you were just talking about. What's one common mistake newer, short-term rental investors tend to make?
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple of them. Number one is not contracting your contractors to support that short-term rental in lieu of you being there. So a lot of people think about, well, if this happens, I'm gonna have to do this. You don't have to do any of it if you contract and you hire people that agree to it, of course, for fair wage. But you want to put down in those individual contractor contracts every single thing that you need to cover from end to end with that short-term rental. And usually for us, the minimum that we have attached to an individual unit or units in that area is we have 2 handymen, really 3. We've gotten to 3 sets of cleaners, team A, team B, and team C, and then also your lawn and outside maintenance. Those are the minimum that we normally have assigned to them. Changes depending on what we have a place with a pool. It just depends. But in those contracts, anything that could go wrong is put in that contract so that cleaner cannot say this is outside of their scope. So a cleaner's checklist looks something like this. Cut on all the lights. If there's any light bulbs out, you have to replace the light bulbs. Check the batteries in a remote. Check the batteries in the AC controller. Anything like that, we make them the first line. We do a lot of picture taking and things like that. What I see that when people say this is a lot of work, or maybe this is not worth the effort, it's because they've taken on a lot of those responsibilities themselves. And you can, again, delegate those out to teams. And I use that key word, teams, because we don't hire solo anyone. So another thing I see people do is they'll hire a solo cleaner. Don't do that, because that cleaner may not be able to do what you need them to do, and that's be there on time at the date of checkout. So we don't push cleanings. Cleanings have to have the same day that a guest checks out. Guest checks out at 10, the cleaners must arrive no later than 10:30. When you're working with solo cleaners, life happens, cars, their kids, things like that. So it's the way that you go about, again, the process to make sure you're covered end to end with these units. So the only thing I make here is maybe a phone call if there's something very important. But before that, somebody's always handling that before it gets to me.
Yeah, I heard you say, first of all, checklist. And I think this is great for any investor, not just, in the hospitality space and short-term rentals, but you think about unit turns and you think about those processes and making sure that things are happening the right way. You talked about having a very clear, defined checklist, something as simple as turning on the TV with a remote control and just making sure the batteries work, making sure the TV turns on properly, right? Just little things like that make a lot of sense. And having that checklist that people can follow, but also not relying on a single individual, meaning you have teams or larger companies, and you have a process in place. So if Johnny's, car doesn't start, you're not screwed because Johnny's the only person who can come and turn the unit, right? And I think that's really important as well. If you're going to scale and manage this thing, you have to have more resources available than your one handyman. And I think that's a really good insight.
I wanted to talk really quickly, and only because I see this a lot, and I just want to make sure I get the information out. It goes back to even how you acquire the units. So the analysis part of it, especially when we're talking about investors, which I've worked for a lot of investors, what you want to make sure is that you have a process to run those numbers, and you're not just going by that that's a touristy area, so it should do well. That is not necessarily the case always. You must run the numbers. If you ask me right now in today's climate for short-term rental, there are three areas that are doing well, and none of them have to do with touristy areas. So one is, of course, I talk about unique stays, building something that's a little different, a container home, a houseboat, a tiny house. That market is actually peaking and it's excelling right now. Tertiary markets are excelling right now, and also overseas opportunities, being able to bring in a little bit more on your profit margin than what you're able to do here in the United States, as long as you know how to run the analysis on those particular areas and those units. Again, I meet a lot of people that say, you know, I've been thinking I really like, I really would like a place at Disney World or something like that. But when you run the numbers for Disney World as far as short-term rentals, you're really going to have to work hard because that is a really difficult place to turn profit margin. I could take something in Austin, Texas, something in Fleming Island, and outperform 4 to 5 units that are at, around Disney World. So again, get under the right mentorship. Make sure you have a process. There's many ways to analyze a property, but you want to get a process that works, and you want to stick by that process and not veer away from it because it will sting you. And that's happened to me as well. Letting personal relationships interfere with my process, and then having to redo something because I'm not sticking to that analysis process.
You talked about being able to take these systems overseas. You've got your
Mhm.
property in the Dominican Republic, and I'm sure, like you and many others, who love the Caribbean, especially for vacations. To make that leap and to go to DR,
Yeah.
there's obviously some governmental changes, some maybe language challenges, things like that when you're working in other countries. Can you talk to us about some of the processes and things you had to overcome and kind of how you looked at that opportunity to make that successful?
Yeah, I love that question as well. I'll tell you that I didn't go over to Dominican Republic solo and just venture over there. What happened was it was a connection that was made through somebody that mutually knew us both. So there was a company owner over there of a real estate company, and then I was over here in the United States with my short-term rental company, and they kind of put together the dots. This real estate company wanted to take some of their inventory and turn them into short-term rentals, but they did not have the expertise on board to do so. So they were looking for, and they probably were looking in countries, just that connection happened. They found our company through that mutual connection, and they brought us over. So I spent a lot of time over in the Dominican Republic getting to know how real estate worked, how the culture worked, and things like that before I actually stepped into my own. We have stepped into my own units. So at first we were kind of managing about 9 of those units, and we set those up for that company, which they blew them away because, again, it's the way that you set them up will dictate how they perform. So I went over there really under sponsorship. I didn't just jump over there. Now, were there some lessons still learned? Yes, still lessons learned that we learned the hard way by going overseas that was not a part of our normal process. We did not take into consideration things like service people don't know how to read, so you're trying to give them a checklist and contract, but over there it's not uncommon that people in the service industry cannot read, or barely write. And there is also a resistance against technology. We didn't take in consideration, and the company that we were under, because labor is so cheap, they had full staff of labor, but we're like, no, this is how we operate. We operate technology top heavy, but that didn't necessarily work out over there. We ended up having to come up with a staff and a staff foreman and things like that, because the culture over there is that a lot of times you deal with petty theft, not from the guests, but from the people that work for you, and that's kind of common over there and something you have to mitigate with the way that you're set up. So there was many challenges, I would say, that, again, I like the fact we use the sponsorship and arbitrage to step in there, because that's not a place that we're looking to scale. We're actually looking to go over Europe. We're actually looking over in Europe now to bring in on our next overseas unit somewhere in Europe, around probably Italy, something like that we're familiar with. I am familiar with from being in the military. But yeah, be careful when you're going into foreign markets, because some things you may not know to look for.
I think you just gave some great insights and just things to keep in mind. You definitely have to understand the culture and, what's going on, but also, again, those processes and systems. And I'm sure that the same is true here in the United States, that one market, one city, you may have to make some adjustments to your processes depending on where it is and all those different things. So really insightful information. And obviously we could talk on and on and on, and we wouldn't be able to cover every single thing one needs to know about investing in short-term rentals, but you've got some resources available. So first and foremost, your company is bucketliststays.co, no M, bucketliststays.co, if they want to learn more about, working with you from that standpoint. And then also you talked about how to do this from a very passive standpoint. Pink Passive Income is the website, pinkpassiveincome.com. We will make sure we link to both of those in our show notes. Tamara, we're going to move on to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Okay, yes, I'll say it's recently it was the tiny house. So we rolled out our first tiny house, and what I thought from kind of you don't have the historical data there, because whenever you start moving out into rural areas and setting up something that's unique, you're not going to necessarily have the competitive information to give yourself the analysis you need. And so our thoughts were, we'll create something really great, which we did, which is the Relentless Raven, that's themed after Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And it was really a I don't know if I could say that, kick butt type of setup. And what we did was we assumed that we could put that anywhere, which we started off by having that outside of Albuquerque. We could put that anywhere and it would perform, but that's not necessarily the case. Location still matters. So we're back at the basics. If you have investment dollars behind anything, you need to know that location still matters. If it's not investment dollars and you have some time to hang out, you can build that audience and you can get it going, that cash flow going. It's just going to take a lot longer. So again, we test the market or test the theory. Does location still matter? If you build something really unique and something special, it absolutely still matters if time is an issue. So I would say that, yeah.
All right. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Digital or mobile resource, I have so many. I would say you have to have a channel manager, and I'll say two. I'm just going to say two because I wouldn't get one without the other. A channel manager and a pricing optimizer. And what that is a channel manager is what deconflicts your calendar, allows you to list across different channels. So you have your direct booking site, booking.com, Verbal, Airbnb. When you list on those sites, you don't want calendar conflicts. And you want it to do the heavy lifting by sending out all of your messages and things like that. That's another key to making it passive, is try to have a setup where the guest doesn't have to contact you. Already have sending out at key moments the information that they need. On the flip side of that, the pricing optimizer. You don't always know when demand is up and down for your market. There may be an event that's coming to town you have no idea about, but with a pricing optimizer, it's the AI-based type of tool. It's going to pick up whether there's a swing in pricing or not and adjust you accordingly without you manually having to adjust your prices and possibly miss out on a big payout and leave money at the table. So I would say those two.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Oh yeah, I love it. Okay, so I have book Traction. It's one of the books that I've implemented in our meetings and things like that. And I love to reference people to, if you don't have a structure for your business, it teaches you the basics, what you should be doing as far as your meetings are concerned, what you should be doing as far as your personnel is concerned, and things like that. And another one is The Greatest Salesman, which is by Og Mandino, which is a great book about how do you really pitch yourself and how are you successful? Because at the heart of it, everybody that's an entrepreneur in the real estate world, at some point you're pitching your product in some form or fashion when you talk about how do you make great returns. So those two books I really love.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Yeah, I journal. So I'm a journaler. I'm somebody who journals, and I set, instead of doing a to-do list in my journal, I do a mini schedule in the morning that shows me if there's any gaps anywhere, because I started off journaling with adding to-do lists, but it really didn't tell me whether I'm able to get this in, during the day. So I'm somebody who journals. I recommend that people journal, and journaling helps you have a place to put down key ideas that may come to you, and you don't know where it came from. It is there, and you find one day that you're doing it.
There you go. All right, give me your number one insight for having successful short-term rentals.
Yeah. So number one insight for having successful short-term: be flexible. Make sure that the deals that you're getting in provide you flexibility, so that you can make the profit margins that you're looking to make, and avoid, getting stuck in anything that becomes more of a liability than an asset to you. So just build in flexibility in your plans.
All right, let's lighten the mood. You are based in Atlanta, Georgia. Great food options there. Which one is your favorite? What's your favorite place to grab a bite to eat?
I'm not a big foodie, and you're not gonna probably because people think when I say it's over, I like the Cheesecake Factory. That's like, whenever I celebrate something, I go to the Cheesecake Factory. So people are not going to be like, oh, that's wonderful. I think it's overrated. That's what a lot of people say. But what Atlanta is known for, what it's known for is great Southern food. You're going to find a lot of places out here that, they know how to do it right around where MLK Center at and things like that. There's actually tours to take foodies around to these places that Atlanta is known for. So I would say Southern cuisine is what Atlanta is known for, and they're really a hodgepodge. You can find anything here, but I'm such just a Cheesecake Factory and I'm happy type of person. So I don't know if that's a good question for me.
Well, hey, either way, it's great to hear that you like what you like, and there's definitely a lot of options for people who want something a little different. But Tamara, I really appreciate your time today. You talked about how you got into the space and realizing that you were just trying to make a little bit extra money renting out that room to start. That led to a unit, you poured into it, and ultimately ended up growing this portfolio. And now here you are helping other people do the same, investing overseas, and now starting to expand to Europe and other places as well. For folks who want to learn more, you've got bucketliststays.co if they want to learn more about kind of what you have to offer and maybe working with them. And also if they want to kind of do it themselves and learn from you, then you've got pinkpassiveincome.com as another resource for them. And I believe you got some books and some other things there that they can check out. So I just want to thank you again for coming on the show today and being a great guest on Multifamily Insights.
Thank you so much, John. This has been a great experience. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We look forward to staying in touch. Take care.